I am Justina Okechukwu, reaching you this week from Accra, Ghana, the venue of the 2023 annual meetings of the African Export-Import Bank. Hello and welcome to the show this week, proudly brought to you with support from the African Energy Chamber. The three-day meeting of the African Export-Import Bank held in Ghana was attended by delegates from Africa, the Caribbean, and around the world, which includes heads of state, including African and non-African policymakers. The annual meetings coincides with the 30th anniversary of Afreximbank, whose idea was mooted at the OAU summit held in June of 1991 in Abuja, Nigeria. Under the theme, Delivering Nation and Building Prosperity for Africans, leaders highlighted the need to boost intra-African trade and integration on the continent. But while those conversations were on, I tracked down and caught up with some energy players in the industry to speak to me about what is at play in the region. More on this in just a moment. Now, Afreximbank has continued to partner with private sector companies in the energy industry to provide finance in order to change the course of history in terms of energy access on the African continent. One of those beneficiaries is Trinity Energy, a South Sudanese energy company with operations in parts of East Africa. Ken Mugambi, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Trinity Energy, was at Afreximbank annual meetings, and I caught up with him for a chat. So how has the conference been for you?
So thank you for having me. The conference has been, it's been great seeing what Afreximbank has managed to accomplish over the last 30 years. The remarks by Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, as usual, were very energizing and very invigorating as a Pan-Africanist myself. So from that perspective, the opening session was very, very powerful in terms of what we can achieve as Africans.
Now, what role has financial institutions like Afreximbank played in your progress at Trinity Energy?
So we started our engagement with Afreximbank 5 years ago in 2018. Primarily, we worked with the bank on a facility for helping to bring in refined petroleum products into South Sudan. And from that, we signed a financing facility with the bank for about $30 million. And we've successfully rolled over that facility for the last 5 years. Actually, it's been enhanced further to about $50 million. And we've seen a very strong partnership with the bank. And beyond really the relationship that we've had as a company with the bank, because of the framework that we set up as a private sector company reaching out to Afreximbank, we've seen the bank come in and support various projects and programs in South Sudan for the government of South Sudan. And they were particularly instrumental in terms of addressing post-COVID challenges in South Sudan and really helping the economy to unlock from the challenges of related to COVID. So I would say that Afreximbank has been a strong partner, not just for us as Trinity Energy, but also for the government of South Sudan.
Now speak to me about the business landscape in South Sudan. How has it been for you?
So thank you. So first of all, let me say we are very privileged that our founder chairman is a South Sudanese gentleman. Very passionate about South Sudan and what the private sector can accomplish in terms of helping South Sudan emerge from the challenges that, first of all, as a newly independent country, because South Sudan is the newest independent country, not just in Africa, but in the world. But secondly, also from many, many years of civil conflict, both during the fight for independence, but subsequently post independence, So we've seen remarkable progress, I must say, over the last 10, 11 years of South Sudanese independence in terms of development of infrastructure, stability, following the signing of the peace agreement in early 2020. And the country has emerged stronger and more stable. And from this, as a private sector company that is really focused on helping South Sudan to achieve energy independence, we have invested quite strongly in terms of growing our retail footprint within the country. We have invested quite a bit in terms of developing petroleum storage infrastructure for the country. But importantly also, we are focusing on helping South Sudan with its most important resource, which is petroleum, crude oil, and really helping the country to increase production. So we are moving further on upstream. We've been a downstream operator, but now we are moving further on upstream in terms of focusing on enhancing oil recovery, technologies for enhancing oil recovery for South Sudan, but also developing new acreages. Huge parts of the country remain unexplored or underexplored, and there's great opportunity for oil and gas resources in South Sudan. But also on the power side as well. South Sudan has the least power connectivity of any country in the world. Only less than 5% of the population has access to power connectivity on the grid. So our focus has also been to provide energy access for the people of South Sudan by developing mini grid solutions, and we are now developing a mini grid solution for the second biggest city in South Sudan, as well as a few other cities that we are rolling out to just help address the issue of electricity access for the masses.
Now, speaking about the conflict in Sudan, I wanted to ask, how has that impacted your progress and the flow of oil into and from South Sudan?
So for South Sudan, we can look at entry points for petroleum products from two sides. So for the northern part of the country, where you'll find a lot of the oil, where the oil fields are, that has been coming in from Sudan. So from Port Sudan down to Khartoum and then into South Sudan. On the southern side, fuel products come in from Kenya and then transit through Uganda into South Sudan. So from the southern side, the impact has not been significant because fuel products are still coming in from Kenya. However, on the northern side, where you find fuel and other consumables for the oil fields, whether it's parts, drilling fluids, chemicals, and all these other consumables for the oil fields have been significantly impacted by the conflict in South Sudan. In Sudan, because obviously of the disruptions along the supply chain. The port has not been affected significantly by the conflict, but obviously the road infrastructure has been affected by the conflict. So what the government of South Sudan has done is to focus on alternative routes, and primarily the port of Djibouti and the port of Mombasa in Kenya have become the alternative routes to address the disruptions that have been occasioned by the conflict in Sudan.
As the demand for new energy sources increase around the world, the need for new processing and storage facilities like FPSOs continue to be on the rise in Africa, particularly in Nigeria. That was part of my conversation with Ken Etete, Chief Executive Officer at Century Energy Group, at the Afreximbank Annual Meetings 2023. Etete told me how his company is bridging the gap to meet the growing demand for deep offshore oil infrastructure in Nigeria and Africa. So it's been 2 days of intense conversations on intra-African trade and integration. What has been your key takeaways from these 2 days?
Well, these 2 days clearly is a demonstration of commitment from African leaders and the Caribbean leaders, showing that Africa and African diaspora are keen on full integration to aggregate their common wealth, to increase trade, and to give more force to the whole Africans and Africans in diaspora. So it's a very intentional and very refreshing to see that there's a strong political will expressed by the political leaders, and under the platform of the Afrexim Bank, you can also see that there is a corporate infrastructure platform that can bring that to reality.
Now, let's move the conversation a bit from the political side of things to energy. Are there any specific local content initiatives that are in place to promote participation of Nigerian companies in FPSO operations?
Well, so you can't take FPSO in isolation, but we have the local, the Nigerian Content Act, which is clearly there to promote or enable Nigerian companies to participate more in the upstream sector. Now, if you dimension that, or if you break it down, you will realize that there are a lot of components, because an FPSO is effectively a what you call you could say an integration of different components of oil and gas activities to give you, or if you like, call it a packaging, because you really packaging mechanical, electrical, civil, all manner of technical resource to produce an equipment or an infrastructure that provide that platform to produce oil. Now, if you take FPSO as a whole, many times it's not so much whether there's no enablement, but probably there are still gaps in terms of management and financing and all that. But as individual parts, there's a lot of enablement or the acts to support Nigerian companies to participate much more than before in FPSO business.
So that brings me to my next question. When you talked about bringing together Nigerian companies, how are you bridging the gap to meet the future demand and penetration of FPSOs, even as more oil and gas projects are beginning to emerge?
Well, again, the fundamental questions have not gone away, and we haven't really provided a sufficient response to those challenging areas, which is management, capital, technology. So, whereas we've made a huge improvement, we are still very far from meeting up the demands for actually Nigerianizing FPSO, because when we go away from the shallow water operations and you start looking at deep water, the technology requirement, the investment requirements is a lot more. The management skills you need is a lot more. So clearly, we will need a lot more collaboration, a lot more support, long-term financing, and a lot local indigenous financing products to support that development. So, of course, there are huge opportunities still emerging in the deeper areas of in offshore West Africa generally. And if you are able to execute FPSO projects in offshore Nigeria, there's no reason why you can't do that for the rest of Africa. So, but as I said, the deeper you go in depth, the more challenging it becomes in financing, in engineering, project management, and all of that. So those are the fundamental issues you have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like there's still so much we need to do when it comes to the Nigerian space in terms of FPSOs.
Right. So we have to build capacity. We have to increase capacity. We have to reduce. We have to close the gaps that exist right now that does not allow Nigerians to effectively take control of major FPSO projects. We have to bridge those gaps.
Imagine a future where tomorrow's solutions build a world of opportunities for all, and where human potential is truly realized, where every child has an equal chance in life, no matter where they were born. Imagine the potential of a continent built on low carbon oil and natural gas and abundant renewable energy. Imagine Mozambique, Angola, Nigeria, Uganda, Senegal, Egypt, Namibia, and Algeria being let free to develop their natural resources without pressure from wealthy countries to leave it in the ground. Imagine an Africa where we cut red tape bureaucracy and provide better fiscal terms so we can compete globally for energy investments. African Energy Week is the African Energy Chamber's annual event held at the Cape Town waterfront, uniting African energy leaders, global investors, and executives from across the public and private sector for 4 days of intense dialogue on the future of the African energy industry, showcasing the latest technologies and innovations to 5,000 plus registered delegates from over 100 countries and international professionals from across the global energy sector. Be part of the future of the energy industry and join the energy movement by becoming an official sponsor, exhibitor, delegate, or partner. African Energy Week.
Welcome back to the program. Now let's talk about women in Africa's energy sector, where a deliberate inclusion of women has been identified as a key to fully unlocking the potential in the sector. The president of Women in Energy Network, Fumi Ogboe, spoke to me about how governments can promote women leadership in the energy sector at sectional, regional, and international levels. Take a listen.
So it's always important to look at gender from the broader perspective of diversity. So Nigeria has done a lot in terms of making sure that there's diversity across local and international content. But not a lot of effort has been made into looking at gender. And so in 2020, we set up an NGO called Women in Energy Network, specifically to highlight and amplify these issues, to help the industry understand that there are very many competent women and there's a big gap in leadership positions as well as technical. And for me, I think a lot of women come in, into the industry, but along the way, there's something we call the missing middle. They leave to go and have children, or they can't be posted around because, in the industry, you have to cross discipline, cross terrain for you to really get the depth of experience that you need to grow and get to the top of an organization. And because women, sometimes find it difficult to navigate that middle when they are either going through bearing, or they get married, or they go to menopause, or, they're not really mobile. And so, WIEN came about to enable women have visibility of opportunities and for the industry to understand the skills that there are so that even when they leave, they can come back. But also to put policies in place that makes it such that they don't quite have to leave. So I think those are the main things that are required. Those policies that make the organization gender friendly, but also access points, entry access points, even when they leave, for them to be able to come back. So, for example, somebody like me, I used to work for Shell. And when my husband got transferred to Ghana, Shell wasn't able to accommodate a transfer for me. So I left. But I was able to now come back many years later as an entrepreneur into the industry. So, we kind of need to see the industry as a broad spectrum of opportunities, either in career, as consultants, in technical service provision perspective, or as board members, as different avenues and renewable power. So we're just sort of trying to build that platform to say this energy industry is varied, is wide, and there are many segments of the value chain where people can play.
So speaking about the value chain, how has local content development influenced foreign investment in Nigeria's oil and gas sector?
So what local content is trying to do is to encourage people to come and invest. So even if you are an original equipment manufacturer or a big multinational somewhere, come and invest in Nigeria. The issue though is the pipeline of opportunities, the projects, because people would want to come and invest when they can see a pipeline of large scale projects. There hasn't been that many. So I think whilst the local content is growing, it's sort of growing slowly, but I think when there's more project opportunities, people are able to take FID on some of these large scale projects, either in the gas or in the renewable or the oil and gas space, then we'll certainly see a better deepening of foreign investors coming to take position. So, for example, I was partnered with a nuts and bolt company that is out of Korea. And just before COVID, they were quite keen to invest. They wanted to set up a factory. But, they couldn't really see any tangible opportunity or a strong pipeline.
So it's more like there is no enabling environment for these investments.
I think it's beyond the enabling environment. Of course, enabling environment has its own issues. So they need to be able to sort of have quick access to permits on the regulatory side, have access to land, have access to all the things that they need. But I think the main thing is that there needs to be projects. Once there's projects, and because capital is shy. It doesn't want to go anywhere where it won't be returned because it's private sector. So if the opportunities are there, investments will come in.
I hope you enjoyed that carefully curated package of the show from here in the beautiful city of Accra. Remember to follow the program on Frontier Africa Reports website, subscribe to our YouTube and follow us across all our social media handles. Don't forget to register and be ready to participate at the coming African Energy Week Summit happening in Cape Town later in October. For now, let's leave you with this clip where delegates at the Afreximbank annual meetings were treated to a rich cultural performance of the reenactment of the play Mansa Musa. I am Justina Okechukwu. Bye for now.
It is I, General Sagamandid, who speaks. Commander of the indomitable forces of our great sovereign, leading a battalion of 30,000 soldiers with an entourage of 25,000 servants, 5,000 officials, clerics, and royals across the empire.
Suma Guru Sundiata Keita Mansa Musa Suma Guru Sundiata Keita.
Mansa peace of life. These are empires of hunger, glories to be told, and lessons to behold. Time must come to be bold, time to find the lost gold. Food for the mind and soul. Food for the mind and soul. Food for the mind and soul. New carbon of the future. What was lost must be found. What was broken must be made.